Questions on book collecting. Hi, I'm Gary Lovisi, and we're going to do something a little different this time. We're going to talk about some of the questions and that I've gotten over time about book values and what to collect and how to collect. And I have some notes here, extensive notes that I'm going to try and bring a lot of things together. Being the author of Antique Trader Collectible Price Guide, this came out in 2008. The book was a very colorful, loaded with full-color images of rare and scarce paperback books. In fact, it was a not the typical paperback price guide, because it didn't list every book that's been published. What it did is list the vintage paperbacks that were the most collectible for various reasons, or the most expensive and sought after. So I tried to take a look at the cream of the crop, maybe the top few thousand, 3,000 or 4,000 books, and a lot of them are pictured in here. And so over the years I've gotten a lot of questions from people. I guess the first question would be like, how much is my book worth? How much is a paperback worth? And I'm just going to go over some of the information that I have. It's a very subjective, it could be subjective too, but it's a subjective topic, because a lot of things come into the value of a book. But there's condition is one of the most important things, and scarcity, demand, and depending, of course, whether it's a hardcover or a paperback. People buy for different reasons, and the main thing is that you should always buy what you like, what makes you happy. Unless you're a dealer, then you're buying for profit or for resale, and that's a different situation. There's a whole different ways of thinking, whereas if you're a collector buying for a collection, or if you're buying for resale as a dealer. Dealer is expecting to make a profit, and they have to buy at a lower price. A collector, he or she can buy at a higher price, as long as the book is something that they really want and they're happy with, or something that they haven't seen in many years. Every once in a while, I or friends of mine will, in the book collecting community, will come across a book that they haven't seen in 20 or 30 years, or they've never seen it, and they've been collecting for 20 or 30 or 40 years. And so when you've never seen a book like that comes along, you want to make sure that you purchase it and don't let it go, because some things don't come around again in this lifetime. On the other hand, you have to be patient also, and on a lot of items, though, they will come around again. I would say that the best thing, as far as the value of a book, is what people are willing to pay for it, and that can be, you can get two crazy collectors in an auction, or on eBay or whatever, or it could be a really scarce book that only has shown up in 20 or 30 years, and it depends on what you decide you want to pay for it. It's again, it's very subjective on the values. Certain books have a range. You could say, like, there's certain books that are, say, $10 to $20 books, or $25 to $50 books, or maybe they're in the $50 to $75 or $100 range. Others that are $100 books, more or less, and it depends on the condition. Condition really has an important impact on the value of vintage paperbacks, but also hardcovers. If you collect hardcovers, the dust jackets on hardcovers are extremely important to the condition of them. And if you have paperbacks, there are paperbacks with dust jackets also that are very collectible and quite rare. How do you know if it's a first edition? People ask me. Well, hardcover versus paperbacks. There's paperback originals. Usually the first time a book has ever appeared in a work has ever appeared in a book. It would be a paperback original. But you can have a first edition that, say, a story or novel that came out of a magazine that was run in installments over the years, over many issues of a magazine. And then when that's collected into a book form, that would be the first book edition, but it's not a paperback original. So there's different ways of looking at it. There's again, with hardcovers, a lot of hardcover books will list first edition. Some of them won't. Some of them will list first impression, second impression. So the first impression of the first edition is usually the true first edition. Second impression is actually a second printing, and these are usually, that might be a second printing before publication, when they went back to press even before the book was published.
I think hardcover publishers, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think
away.
they
Go ahead,
intentionally
ask questions.
try to make it confusing for you, so you don't know if it's a first edition or not. I mean, they're not consistent. They use different words and letters, and they
Absolutely, because they're trying to sell books, and they know that there's a first edition collector's market out there, and so when they're putting out books, they want you to believe that they do that a lot of times with books. Paperback publishers, when they reprint a hardcover, they'll change the title. So you think you're getting a new book by a certain author, and then you realize, wait a minute, I've read this before. A lot of times that's happened with people who have read science fiction books by Ace books, Ace paperbacks, Ace doubles, stuff like that. They were reprinted, and you'd say, oh, it's got a new cover, and it's a new title, sometimes even a different author. And hardcover publishers would also do that. They would play little games for a while. First, they would put a first edition, and then there's a number line that you notice in all of the current hardcovers, 1 to 10 usually, or 1 to 9, and that number line indicates that, of course, if it has first edition with a number line that begins with a 1, then it's the first edition in a hardcover book. And some trade paperbacks do that also. But not always the case. Random House used to do in the, I believe, 60s, 70s, and 80s. They would start off the number line with a 2. It would say first edition, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Tell the story of that book.
Yeah, number 2.
Them.
So you would look. So actually, I knew this, but it's just like you forget things sometimes. You don't pay attention. Random House does this. I believe Viking did this, and there's other publishers, maybe Chilton. A few publishers did this at certain times in their publishing careers, and then not always, but in certain years or certain times they would do that. So I mean, there was a book that I had. It was a James Crumley book, and I love James Crumley's hard-boiled crime novels, and I think this was The Wrong Case, classic hard noir, great book, and beautiful first edition, beautiful hardcover and dust jacket, nice pristine condition, and I looked and I go, it's got the 2, and I don't know why it slipped my mind when I put it up for sale. I go second printing, and see, this is where knowledge comes in, because a very savage female collector got in touch with me, and she asked me quite innocently, I have a question about the book that you're selling. Does it say first edition, and on the number line, does it start with 1 or 2 or 3? What is the number line? So I told her, I said, yes, it states first edition, which that should have told me right. I don't know why, you forget things,
Senior moment.
Well, not even a senior moment, because this is like 10 years ago. But it's just like you can't remember everything and keep track of everything. So I says, yes. I just said, just like quick, because I was busy. Sometimes when you're very busy, you get neglectful. So I says, yeah, it's got a 2 on it. And so, and I knew it was a good book. Even as a second printing, I put it up for about $100. And she bought it right away. And I go, okay, good. I told my wife, I says, Lucille, yeah, I sold that book. Yeah, it's the second printing. And I go, you know, let me think about that. And I realized, oh my God, it's a first printing because it was a random
Of course,
house.
I was grateful because if it was a first edition, you would have kept it. So
Yeah.
at least you sold it.
Yeah, but it would have been worth at that time maybe 500 or something or 750. It was.
You wouldn't have sold it. You would have kept it.
I would have kept it. Yeah, but see, so this is the kind of thing that little annoying things that happen in the book collecting field. You know, everybody's got stories
It's
of
the
these kind of
publisher's
things.
fault, not yours. They should have had a one there.
Yeah, but that's just what they do. There's so you have to little codes and little things like that. I'm not going to go into all of them here because there's a lot of different things. We're gonna move on to. Just want to.
You want to go to the next page? You want me to read the
paperback
questions?
originals, and then we're gonna. How important is condition? Well, you know, I think to me it's basically like. It's like when you talk about real estate. You know, it's location, location, location. So with books, it's condition, condition, condition. The best conditioned book is the best book that you can. That's you know. That you should probably try to get, as long as the price is reasonable. If you have a really exquisite condition copy, you're going to pay a premium, and that's just, you know, the way it goes. But usually, it's worth it in the end. If you're a collector and you really like this author or this artist or whatever this genre, and you want to, you're collecting them seriously. You want to get the best condition. A lot of people are looking also just for a copy of the book, and that's fine too. Some people are looking for a copy of the book to read. They're looking for so-called reading copies. Reading copy can be anything that's in fair condition. Basically, the story is complete, the text is complete, but it can have all kinds of damage to the cover, the spine. This goes for hardcover or paperbacks. Sometimes not even. It can be a paperback without a cover. It can be hardcover with no dust jacket, all torn up, ex-library copy with the library stickers and the library stamps in it, all over the place. But some people, you know, just want a copy of the book to read. As long as the text is complete, that's what they care about, and that's fine too. Yeah, they're not looking for a mint collectible copy. Other people are. A lot of people will have, of a favorite author, they'll have both. They'll have a reading copy, and then they'll have the really nice collectible copy that they won't read because they want to keep that in the best shape possible. It's just to have a nice copy, but they'll have a knockaround copy to read. It's interesting. I mean, different nations, you know, like in the UK, a lot of the collectors just want a copy of the book. And if they collect science fiction or murder mysteries or whatever it might be, they just want to get a copy of the book, and they're not so condition conscious.
The ones that you know, you should say.
Yeah,
The collectors you know.
The ones that I know, which mostly like a lot of the people that collected over the years, that has changed. If you go back 20 years or so, in the UK they were conscious of they weren't conscious of condition. They just wanted the book. There were a lot of collectors that collected American JD and crime fiction, juvenile delinquent, crime fiction, stuff like that, and they wanted it in any condition, just as long as they could have the book. American collectors are much more fussy. They've always been more fussy, and they're still fussy. And the British and European collectors have come on board with the idea of wanting books in better condition, upgrading copies and stuff like that. I usually collect. My thing is that I try to find nice copies that are affordable. I try to get the nicest condition copy that I can find. I've passed up some books that were dogs that were in terrible shape, and there was one particular one that I passed up. '60s book that I'm still looking for any copy. It was what was it, $2 or something? And
It was
$5,
$5. You wouldn't spend- it
but it
was
was
beat.
falling apart. It
Yeah.
was like falling apart. I go,
Those
I go,
were
look
before
at this.
cameras. We couldn't even take a picture of it.
Yeah, this was maybe 20 years ago, and I've never seen a copy of it since. But it's I try to buy the best copy that I can find, and sometimes I do upgrade if I have a real dog that I want to get a better copy of. But usually I'm pretty happy with the condition of the books that I have. The British, Canadian, Australian stuff is much harder to find, especially in nice condition. British Boardman books, the paperbacks, had paper-thin covers that are so delicate. They get creased, they get worn and rubbed in terrible condition. Very hard to get them in really nice condition. Harlequin books from Canada, for some reason, they have the printing process or whatever it was is very cheap, and the color runs. It kind of gets rubbed off, and those it's very hard to get in pristine shape. So it's there's, and also the Canadian and British books, Australian books. You're talking about countries with a lot less population, so there's a lot less books printed by the publishers for those countries. So there's less books overall. In America, there's publishers publish usually, like Avon Books. When I went to Avon Books, I saw the contracts for A. Merritt's books, and his books to Avon, the early ones from the 40s, were done in 100,000 print runs. And that's because it's America. They printed them and they distributed them all over the country, a big population. Canada and England, very different situation. You might have the initial print run of 5,000 or 10,000, and that's all the copies that are out there of a particular book. And it's a lot. It's a big difference. How to grade a book? Talk about subjective. It's somewhere between a guess and an art, and it's paperbacks are graded a certain way. They're good, very good, fine. They're not graded as mint. That's a comic book term. You could say a book is mint, but really what we mean is it's fine. There's the dust jacket on a hardcover is especially older hardcovers from the 20s, 30s, and 40s are. It's interesting that people used to buy the original early hardcovers that were published in the 1890s and early 1900s didn't have dust jackets. They had the binding was embossed, and it was really very nice.
Fine bindings.
The fine bindings, embossed bindings, illustrations were on the boards of the book, and then they had dust jackets. And what happened in the early books with dust jackets in the 20s and 30s, people used to buy them, and especially with mysteries. And they buy the book and they throw the dust jacket away and read the book. And there's a lot of those books. The dust jackets are really rare today. They're very hard to find. And all the dust jackets are, in some cases, are more collectible, more desirable than the actual book because of that reason. They're more scarce, and dust jackets are more delicate because they cover the book, and so the dust jacket condition is very important. Signatures.
Personalized or not.
Yeah, personalized or not. If you have to Gary from Joe, the whoever, famous author,
Lansdale.
that's not really that's not a value there except to me or to whoever it would be. is having the book signed to them. If that means, it depends on how much that means to you individually. It may mean a lot to you to have a famous author or an author who's a friend sign a book to you, personalized, and then sign it. And if that's a personal thing for you, and that may be important to you to have that, and then in that case, that's fine, and that's really good. Usually, as a myself being a book collector, and I also buy things with the thought of selling them later, or having them to see what the value would be as an investment, because basically I never had the money to buy a lot of the books that I wanted to buy, and I still don't. But I like the idea of having books that I can, if I do decide to sell them, that they'll have a value to them if they're signed that's appropriate, rather than if it's just signed to me. The only exception to that would be, like, I have some books, like I have a book by the mystery writer James Randisi, who's a Western and mystery writer, and signed to Dean Koontz, or signed actually from Dean Koontz to James Randisi, and books like that, where it's the book is signed to a known author or celebrity or some such. It'd be nice to have a book signed by Robert Bloch to H.P. Lovecraft, or from H.P. Lovecraft to Robert W. Chambers, or something like that. That would be, that would be a museum piece. But basically, you want a generic signature, and it's also signatures would be from the author, but also from the possibly from the editor, and also from the cover artist. I collect vintage paperbacks, and I like paperbacks from the vintage era, from the 40s and 50s, where I have the book signed by the author on the title page, and then maybe underneath on the title page the cover artist. I have a few books like that. Usually artists like to sign on the cover, because that's where they did their art. That's their artwork, and they sometimes like to sign by their name, where if the signature is visible on the cover. Kind of like comic books, comic book artists, they always sign on the cover of the comic book. Authors like to sign on the title page. That's where I like to have them sign, if they've done a novel, to sign on the title page, usually underneath their name on the title page. Some people like to have them sign on the frontis page, or or on the even on the copyright page sometimes. Also, authors sometimes sign in anthologies. I've had a lot of stories in anthologies. So I sign on the contents page, where my name is indicating my story, or sometimes on the page where my story would appear, and that's what people want to ask me sometimes to sign in either of those locations. And when I ask people also to sign their work in an anthology, they do the same thing. So that's different places where you can sign. Just trying to.
The next question is what subjects do you collect, and what are
collecting
the
subjects.
subjects?
I mean, we all have our favorite subjects, what we like to read. It usually starts off you're reading a certain genre of book, and then you start collecting them. I mean, there's everything: science fiction, mystery, horror, hard-boiled crime, murder mysteries, classic murder mysteries, true crime. There's everything that you can think of. There's all kinds of softcore adult material from the 50s and 60s that's kind of sexy. There's 60s sleaze, stuff like that. And there's many different things you can collect. There's all kinds of people collect by cover image topics, and also subgenres like JD, juvenile delinquent books, or drug books, or gay or lesbian books, or violent covers. There's a collecting genre of people who collect books with
my favorite,
there's upside down dead girls,
dead blonde girls,
dead blondes. There's also dead people in bathtubs. For some reason, there's a lot of murder mystery covers on paperbacks, especially that have dead people in bathtubs.
Falling out of windows.
Falling out of windows. There's a whole whatever you can think of, whatever possible subject matter you could think of. There's a paperback or a hardcover that has that image on it. I mean, it's just it's incredible. There's all the bondage,
men slugging women, women slugging men,
women slugging men, and people stabbing each other, shooting each other, rocket ships, space.
Oh, what's that, like keyhole or through the legs,
Keyhole.
like those images where
there's a
perspective,
just different perspective, through the legs, through the keyholes. I mean, there's just a million things like that. But it's a lot of them are fun. They're interesting. They're kind of cool covers with some of those topics and those images. So there's so much that the subjects that you can collect, and of course you're reading the book, and it's about that story. So there's just a lot of things that are like really cool.
Do you see the next question? Can you see
Yes.
it? Price guides?
Price guides. Let me just take a
So
drink.
it's price guides. How do you use them, and are the prices like etched in stone, or what,
Price guides, how do you use them? First of all, the prices are not etched in stone on any of the guides. My guide came out in 2008, and it was the prices were what I figured out they would be for 2007. What I did with this book, now this is a different guide from a lot of the other books. A lot of price guides list every book. I listed like just the cream of the crop, and this book is heavily illustrated color photos. So it's a different kind of book, and that's what
Well,
you
just
should know.
explain how they came about, like how you saw
Yeah,
that
well,
there were no images in collectible books.
right. A lot of the price guides had tiny images in black and white, like this size, and maybe a color section of 2 or 3 pages, and they were basically lists and lists and lists, endless lists of books, which is great for information. But when you have a book like that out already with all that information and everything listed, then if you don't update the book with the new prices, there's no reason to have a new book.
Right.
So they my publisher wanted a new book, and I says, well, it's been done before. I says, but I could do it and update the prices. But what I'd rather do is take a look at the key books, and then show a kind of a feast for the eyes by showing all the books in color. And it's just page after page after page. And these are the more scarce, rare paperback editions, and everything that's in here, the really collectible stuff, digests, dust jacketed, L.A. Bantams, everything is in this book. So that's the way I wanted to do it. The other thing is, I came up by coming up with my values of the books. It was an interesting way to look at things. I had my own value of the book, of what the books in that I was going to show were worth. But I wanted to go through. I went through about 24 of the most knowledgeable paperback book collectors and dealers at the time when I did the book. And it's interesting, I found out some interesting things.
Well, they were each specialists in a particular
area. I went
area.
to people who were dealers who deal in everything, but also dealers who were specialists in certain areas. So you have science fiction, fantasy, and horror specialists, crime, mystery, detective, all of that specialists, and then you have basically sleaze and good girl art and softcore specialists. And each one of them values the books in their specialty higher than those that are not in their specialty. So it's very interesting. I have one fellow who's a auctioneer, and he collects science fiction, and he puts his science fiction values, very knowledgeable about what they are, and he puts those higher and puts other things lower. And it's interesting because it's just a very subjective kind of way that collectors and dealers and look at the topics that they're the books that they're selling. They tend to value what they're interested in or what they're selling more than other items, and so I noticed this, and I was able to collate all the data together and kind of come out with a price that was like I think is really more fair, because taking the high end prices and then the low end prices and bringing it into a more fair, realistic.
Fair.
Yeah. Also, there's a lot of books that are very desirable, but they're not rare. On the other hand, in very nice condition, they go for some nice money. So there's a lot of things to consider. Also, I mean, I had, for years, I've been a collector who deals with other collectors. And one of the things that I do is I trade back and forth with collectors. And it's interesting that, I'll deal with collectors that collect science fiction. And usually it's very hard to get a science fiction book from a really rare something that from a science fiction collector, because that's something that he collects also, so he's not going to want to let that go. But if he has some sleaze books or some girly digests or whatever, or some pulps, or maybe some murder mystery digests or murder crime paperbacks, those he wouldn't value so highly, and he may trade those to something else. So that's a way of doing some good trades sometimes, where two collectors who have items that they're not necessarily specialists in, and they're not necessarily married to keeping those books, they'll be willing to trade them for other things, and that's a good way to find some items that sometimes you wouldn't be able to get
that leads
otherwise.
us to the next question, which is, where do you get your books?
Well, basically everywhere. I mean, we have a list over here, and it's collections, collectors, ABE, eBay, Biblio, Elibris, AdAll, Facebook, flea markets, library sales, charity shops, Salvation Army, antique stores, book shows. Also, antique shows and comic book shows. Sometimes dealers there, that's another thing, it's like sometimes dealers there at antique shows or antique stores or comic book shows, they'll have paperbacks. Maybe they'll have just a box, or maybe they'll just have 5 or 10 or 1 sometimes, but it might be something special, something really good. So you never know what you're going to find, and that's part of this crazy hobby, is the hunt. And it's interesting books turn up in the weirdest places, and from the weirdest people sometimes.
Remember,
it's like you never unexpected.
Remember, we went to a flea market in Staten Island, at Richmond Town,
Yeah.
and there was an old lady who was selling depression glass, which I collect.
Yes.
And we went over to her, and what did you find on her table?
Well, this little old lady, she must have been about 80 years old, and she had all glassware, which I'm not interested in, and which my wife does like. And she had, of all things, a whole group of sleaze paperbacks, 1960s nightstand books, really nice condition. She had like maybe a dozen of them, and I bought them all. And I was like,
and what did you
I
ask
couldn't
her?
Believe, I said, first of all, I said, like, I couldn't believe she had them, and I said, do you have any more of these? And she goes to me, says, you like the sexy books,
The
don't
naughty
you?
ones.
Yeah, and I go, well, yeah. Do you have any more of these? You know, it's just like very unexpected that she had.
Do you remember what she said?
Books. She says, you like the.
She said,
the
yes,
dirty
I
books.
do,
Yes, I
but
do.
they're in my bedroom, and you can't go there.
Yeah. And I said, thank God. Yeah. There was a antique junk store in Staten Island.
Mm-hmm.
That's full
Again,
of
Staten
stuff.
Island, yeah.
Yeah, full of stuff. And actually, my wife found this store, and she clued me onto it, and I went there. And she says, the guy's got a lot of old paperbacks. And I says, well, where? I don't see anything anywhere. Because they're all underneath the shelf, on the floor, in the back of the shelf.
Under the dresser.
Under
There was
the
like
dresser.
a china
There was a
closet.
dresser on the floor, in the back. And I go, really? I go, so I go, this is like, let me see what's there. So first of all, I'm digging out, grabbing out piles of books.
On your hands and knees.
Yeah. It wasn't anything like rare, but there was really beautiful unread copies of 50s and 60s murder mysteries. And they were all in like mint condition. I couldn't believe it. And they were all like a quarter. So I bought them all. I think I bought 3 bags.
Yeah.
I bought all the books that he had. He says, I never sold any books. I said, well, you have them like hidden underneath this place. Nobody can get to them. But, you know, it was, you never know what you're going to find. It's, we went to a antique mall in Massachusetts one time, and they have stalls of people selling stuff. And basically in this place, the people that sell at the stalls weren't there. You just go through this mall and you pick up what you want and then bring it up to the front desk, and they see the sticker where, you know, what stall, and to charge you accordingly. There was just, as a friend of mine would say, rubbish. There's nothing there for me, except one stall had a wicker basket, and it was filled up with 1950s detective crime magazines. Offbeat and Two-Fisted Tales,
yeah.
and multiple copies of them. There was only about, I think, maybe 6 or 8 issues, but there were multiple copies of them, and they were like, I think 50 cents or 25 cents a piece. So I bought all of them, and I was like, wow, that was nice to find those. And this is, you find books everywhere. You find them in the oddest of places. You never know what, book collector friends, when you're talking about different books you're looking for, telling them like what your interest is, and see what they have that might be good for a trade. Trading is always good. I think it's a great way to, if you have a book or some books that you want to that you're not especially wedded to. On the other hand, you're really desirous of getting a certain book that somebody else has, and he may say like, I really want this book, but the other ones, so you can do some trades, and it works out mutually beneficial for both of you, and that's a good way of doing increasing your collection and not spending money also, which is also nice, because some of the stuff is really they're really collectible, desirable books that have a lot of demand on them, in nice condition, can really cost you a bit of money. And so there's a lot of people that collect in any condition just to have a copy of the book, and that's fine. But I always say, like, if you can get the best condition copy at a reasonable price, that's the main thing. And the other thing is basically, what I just want to say is buy what you love, and if what you bought makes you happy, then you haven't paid too much. Then you've done well. And this is just a off the cuff talk about books and collecting. I hope you enjoyed it. Something different. Thanks for looking, and if you did, give us a thumbs up and a like, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.